and I'll get to that one in a minute. The three foundational worldviews. Atheism, there is no God at all, period. God does not exist, there's nothing. Pantheism, everything is God. God is me, God is the wall, God is the sky, God is the universe, there is no difference. God is just the energy in the universe, and is just expressed in people, expressed in plants, expressed in, animals, but everything is God, and there is no God but all. Theism, there is only one God, and there is no God but the Lord. Okay? Polytheism, we're not going to include in this comparison because, number one, there's very few examples of polytheism today. Most people would say Hinduism is polytheism. Technically speaking, Hinduism is not polytheism, it's pantheism. It's expressed in a polytheistic way, but Hinduism is pantheistic at its core belief system, that God is everything and everything is God. The many gods that they worship are expressions of that God. Do you have a question? Oh, okay.
I do.
Sure.
Where do you include agnosticism? Because a lot of agnostics claim that they believe in a higher power, but they don't have sufficient evidence to support it.
I'm going to show you toward the end of the class, agnosticism sort of falls under atheism. It falls under that category. And that's why, I kind of trim it down so that it's easier for us to take off these bites, because polytheism is also sort of a form of theism, but there's, again, it's virtually extinct. There is one form of polytheism, anybody know? It's actually practiced in America, or at least founded in America.
Mormonism?
Yep, Mormonism. But the difference there is that they would not say that they're polytheistic. They would say that they only worship the one God of the Bible. But in the basis of their faith, we're all gods, and we all can be gods and have our own planet and be gods over any, so that there are many gods, but they only worship this God. So they would call themselves monotheists. The only time you really see true polytheism is in mythology, is in when you read, Greek, about the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Scandinavian gods, Thor, and in Greece you've got Zeus and Athena, and all those are the many gods that people worship, and you just don't see that. There are some small pagan religions, even in American Indian, Native American religion, they're really animists. They believe that God expresses himself in living things. They may say, oh, this is the eagle spirit, or the eagle god, or this is the wolf god, or the wolf spirit. It's not really polytheism. They believe that God exists in the animated things, in people and in animals and plants. So it's not really even true polytheism. We really don't see true polytheism practiced predominantly in any way today. So that's why I don't really, in what we're about to do in the comparisons we're about to make, I don't include that in there. It certainly is a worldview, and we're going to get into that, but these are the three foundational worldviews as we get into it. Just for definition purposes, again, atheistic, from atheos, is none or without, and then theos, God, so no Godism, without God belief. Monotheism, mono, one, theos, God, so it's just one God, and again, pan means all or entire. So God is all, and God is in all. And there's no important thing with pantheism is that there is no distinction between the universe and God. That the universe is God, and God is the universe, and even that we are even God, and God is us, and there's just no distinction. Okay. Some examples: atheism, humanism, various branches of Buddhism. Believe it or not, Buddhism is at its original founding, it was atheistic. Philosophically, there's atheism, agnosticism, and skepticism. That's kind of what you were talking about, Tony. Sort of falls on that there's no God, or, I don't know if there's a God, or there probably isn't a God, or if there is a God, there's no way of knowing there's a God. So it sort of falls under that category. Monotheistic, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are really, also you can include Baha'i and Zoroastrianism. Some forms of Hinduism, because some Hindus only worship one God. They will only worship that's their God, and that's the only one that they'll worship. They won't worship other gods. But even that God is really just an expression of Brahman. In Hindu, Brahman is the all-encompassing God, and even the word God, because of our understanding of it, doesn't really fit with their definition. Brahman is just all there is. Brahman is like the energy in the universe, and that the gods are expression of Brahman, and then there are even expressions of the expressions. There are manifestations of the expressions, and they call them avatars. And that's where we got the term when, we've got our Google account or our Facebook account or whatever, and, we've got our avatar that represents us. That's where we got that word, because from Hinduism.
The way you just described that, it almost sounds like you're saying they believe that matter preceded agency.
Well, clarify that.
Okay. You just said that they believe that there's an energy that comes before the gods. The gods are the agency, but before that comes this energy, which they can't even name.
You're talking about pantheism?
Yeah.
Not really, because it's all one. And that's why it's difficult to describe. Even when I describe it as an energy, in pantheism, there is no distinction, between energy and God and manifestation. And, in Hinduism, there are expressions of Brahman. And that's why I say it's not true polytheism, because they're not a separate God. They call them gods. They use the term, this is my God, and they have, 750,000 gods in Hinduism, something like that, some astronomical number. But there is the point of pantheism is that there is no distinction between matter, and energy, or matter and agency, or anything. There's, matter, everything is God, and nothing preceded anything. Everything, and that's the other thing, everything is eternal. And we'll get into that a little bit more too. So that's pantheism. That's why you'll even see pantheism in some forms of Buddhism, because Buddhism grew out of Hinduism. And some forms of pantheism claim that the universe is just rigid and it's unchanging. Others, it's more possessed of spiritual properties. So we'll just see, because pantheism is because it's so broad, it's very difficult to define. It's sort of this all-encompassing, open up. That's why the number of gods in India keep growing, because there's just no end to it. You can't say that such and such is not a god. Well, if I say it's a god, he came to me, he revealed himself to me, whatever, this is my God. And and so the gods keep growing. And the expression in pantheism, particularly in Hinduism, is the arms wide open, because they just bring it all in, bring it all in. And it sounds very pluralistic and inclusivistic, which it is, but the ironic thing is, like we were saying in the beginning of the class, they're making a truth claim, that this is the way things are, and that all things are true. Well, is that true? If that's true, then Christianity, which is restrictive, is also true. Oh no. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be all-inclusive and saying everything is true, except that which we say is untrue. If you say everything is true except for somebody who says that only one thing is true. So it's just the way the logic falls. You have to be restrictive. They don't see it that way, because again, they're just, their arms wide open, they embrace everything. So we'll look at these different aspects, comparing the three foundational worldviews. The view of God. In atheism, no God exists. In or beyond the universe, there is nothing. Matter is all there is. They're naturalists. Examples: Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre. Pantheism. There is no God outside the universe. God is the universe, and the universe is God. You know, some will call it, like, again, even the term God to them is too narrow because of the connotation that it carries, particularly in the Western world. That God is a him. You know, to them, God is not a him. God isn't even really an it. God is just everything. God is all there is. So some will say that mind is all there is. That there is a mind out there. There is one, you know, sort of, not even a specific mind, not even like an intellectual mind, but just mind in general is out there. And it's our job to try to find that mind. Examples you'll find in New Age movement, Hinduism. Theism. Again, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. An infinite personal God exists beyond and in the universe. He created and sustains the universe and acts within it. The universe displays both matter and mind. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And Islam is even borderline theistic because their God is so impersonal. He's not a loving God. He's not a personal God. He's not a God who necessarily cares about you and reaches out to you. He is just a God that seeks you to submit. And that's, you know, so it's borderline because the personal relationship between man and God is very different from our concept of who God is. So, view of origins. Where did everything come from? The atheistic point of view. Some will say the universe is eternal, that it just always has been, you know, or they have some new theories out that the universe sort of keeps recreating. It's eternal, but it like expands and then contracts and then expands again and then contracts again, and it's just been doing that for eternity. Others, matter came into existence from nothing and by nothing, the Big Bang Theory. You know, there was something very, very small and there was nothing in it and it exploded, basically. And then evolution and natural laws explain everything. Everything, again, they're just naturalistic. There's a natural explanation for everything that exists. And it's interesting too, because one of the criticisms that atheists will have against Christianity is that we have a belief system and then we try to fit things into our belief system. And even if that were true, well, they're guilty of the same thing. You know, when talking about evolution, when things don't work out, when the mathematicians finally crunch all the big numbers and they go, it's still not enough time. They just go, oh, well then it must have been longer. You just keep adding years. That's the magic powder, the magic dust in evolution, is just keep adding years. Because if you keep adding years, eventually the odds say it will happen. You know, so they're doing the same thing. They're fitting. They've got their belief system and they just fit everything into it. So, view of origin for pantheism: the universe is eternal; it always has been, and because there is no distinction between God and the universe or man, everything always has been. And we're going to see in one of the other views that there's sort of a cycle that goes on in pantheism.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
You always do. You're always on the next page.
Is exception to that nirvana is actually an escape from the cycle?
Well, that's when we get into the view of destiny. We'll get to that. Yeah, this is the view of origins, and there is a cycle. There is, but they believe that the universe always has been, viewing it from the beginning. Theism: the universe is not eternal, created out of nothing by God, who transcends His creation. And this, this is an important point that let me just. Again, some of you know this, some of you may not be aware. I may have spelled that wrong, I'm sorry. Transcendence and immanence. qualities of God that we're going to see, particularly between pantheism and theism. Transcendence means that God is separate. God is not part of who we are. Immanence means God is near. Okay? Pantheism is completely immanent. That God is in us, part of us, and there is no transcendence. When we get into studying a little bit about deism, they believe in complete transcendence. That God has nothing to do with us, God doesn't interact with us, He is so completely separate that He doesn't even come near to us at all. Traditional theism believes in both the transcendence and the immanence of God. That He is separate from us, but He is also near. That God is being, being omnipresent. God is in this room. God occupies space in this room, in His presence. Just as He occupies space in, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. He's over there as well, occupying space, because God is immanent and He is present with His creation, but He is not entirely part of His creation, as the pantheist believes. So that's why it's an important distinction for us to understand when we're looking at these. View of man. Atheism, since there is no God, man is the measure of all things, man in effect is God, figuratively, since man achieves all things by his own power. That's humanism. Man is God. There is no other standard but what we make. Pantheism, man is God literally, because everything is God. And that the problem is that human beings, we don't realize that we are God. And that's sort of the mission in pantheism, is realizing that you are God, and sort of coming into touch and understanding with that concept. Theism, man is a finite creature created by a loving personal creator. Man and God will forever be distinct, transcendent. View of morality. And this is where atheism really gets tricky. Because there is no absolute moral standard, since there is no moral lawgiver. Morality is established by society. So literally, in atheism, if society decides that it's okay to, rape, murder, steal, if it's okay, then it's okay. And it's not, there's no, as one guy said, was explaining it, that for me to go up and shake your hand or to punch you in the face are morally equal. There's no difference between the two. Because if I decide that I just want to punch you, that you don't have any right to say that that's a wrong thing to do. Now, atheism would say that an act is good if it brings about good results. Well, it made me feel good to punch you. That's a good result. See, it all gets relative. They would say, no, it's not right because you invaded his, well, but it's something I felt I needed to do. If I want to steal something of yours because I think that I deserve it more, then that's okay. There's no such thing as sin. Because sin is a moral absolute. And it's something that's wrong and that's always wrong. Pantheism, there's still no moral absolute, no moral standard outside of us, since we are God. So morality is relative. And again, pantheism gets very self-defeating because, they say ultimately there is no good or evil because all is one and there is no such thing as sin. But they believe in karma. That the bad things you do will cause you to come back in a lower form until you have paid for the crimes or the wrong that you committed in a previous life. And so it contradicts itself. They don't believe in sin. There's neither good nor evil, yet they somehow believe that there is a compensation factor for the good and evil things that you do. So, theism, there are moral standards given by God, moral lawgiver. Morality is objective, eternal, and universal. That laws of right and wrong exist outside of us. That there is a standard that we submit to outside of whatever we decide. And in America, we sort of live in both. There are some things that people will say, oh, that's always wrong. And there are some things that people will say, well, it's wrong sometimes. Is it wrong to have premarital sex? That's my choice. Is it wrong to abort a baby? Well, it's a woman's choice to do so. Is it wrong to molest a child? Well, yeah, that's always wrong. How do you pick and choose? When does the time come when they decide, well, maybe it is okay to molest a child? You get down a slippery slope. I mean, if you decide that we get to pick and choose what's right and wrong, then eventually everything is right. So, with theism, there is always, with Judaism and with Islam, there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. We differ drastically sometimes on those things, particularly between Christianity and Islam. They have a concept of what is right, but to them, that is a moral absolute. View of destiny. Now here we get into the issue of the cycle and nirvana with pantheism. Atheism, death is the end of existence, life is hard, and then you die. That's it. There is nothing beyond this life. You're worm food. There's no individual immortality, only the human race itself is immortal. Life is without purpose and meaning. And this is a pretty depressing outlook. Ravi Zacharias wrote a book, Can Man Live Without God? And he wasn't even trying. He said, look, I'm not trying to prove that God exists because he should exist. I'm just trying to say this, Ravi Zacharias' famous expression, he says, follow this statement to its logical conclusion. Right? He always says that. Well, he takes atheism to its logical conclusion, and it ends in despair. That there is no hope. That atheism leaves people without any hope of anything and no purpose for existence. And that a true atheist, there have only been a couple of true atheists, he says, in existence. Adolf Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, these guys who say, look, I'll never have to pay for anything that I do. I don't believe that anything is right or wrong, and that I'll never have to answer for my actions. So, I can do anything I want. And, ultimately, atheism has no meaning and no despair. You might as well do whatever you want. It doesn't matter, because there is no hope in it. Pantheism, death is the end of one life and the beginning of another. They believe in immortality through reincarnation. The purpose of life is to merge with God and lose individual identity. We will all live forever as God. In pantheism, we'll see it best expressed in Hinduism. They're on this wheel called samsara, they call it. And they, American pantheism says that reincarnation is a wonderful thing. That, you get to come back, I was once General Patton, or I was once George Washington, or I'll come back in the future as some great president or whatever. True pantheism, that reincarnation is torture.